Chips clatter in the dark, while the screen emits a late night glow. You are a few antes deep into a Balatro run, and the blinds rise quickly enough to tighten your stomach with each tick of the clock. In the corner, a strange clown of a joker sits with three others, multipliers stacked high enough that they almost seem out of place. The next hand arrives, and for a moment, you have no idea how this will play out. Your deck is a beautiful mess. Half the cards have foil or shiny borders. Some bear tiny symbols that promise more chips. The discard button feels just as risky as the play button, because every choice changes the math. In Balatro, they come from a single, unknown Canadian developer who worked an IT job while creating the game in his free time. Before this roguelike deck builder sold millions of copies, it existed as a nameless project in a folder called Card Game, sitting alongside the files of a job that paid the bills. Now let's go to your favorite bar, grab a drink, and join me for today's story about LocalThunk and how Balatro was really made. In late 2021, that quiet apartment resembled a remote office more than a workshop. LocalThunk spent his days working in IT in Saskatchewan. He handled support calls, server issues, and the daily routine. Outside, the prairie winter kept the light dim and the days short. Nights and weekends were dedicated to experiments, short prototypes, and small art projects that rarely went beyond a small group of friends. Game development had been part of his life for about 10 years by then, but it existed alongside the job, not instead of it. Over that decade, he created a collection of small prototypes and personal projects that mostly remained private or within a select few. On December 13, 2021, with about 3 weeks of saved vacation time, he started a new card game template. By December 20, 2021, it was stored in a folder called Card Game. At that point, Balatro didn't even exist as a word. He set clear boundaries without writing them down. This would be a solo project, built in Lua on the Love framework he already knew, allowing him to iterate quickly without waiting for anyone else. Even within that narrow scope, one idea solidified early: chips times mult. Every hand became a bet against your own planning. The first few weeks focused on creating a scoring system and ensuring the math felt right. By the end of December, he had a peculiar little prototype. No jokers, no shop, no blinds, just a standard deck and a system that added random upgrades to cards between hands. Playing Balatro now, it's hard to imagine it as an unfinished online toy hiding in a folder with a name that sounds like a joke. When January 2022 arrived, the vacation ended, but the project continued. Workdays returned to IT tasks, yet evenings turned into Joker poker time as soon as he closed his laptop. He treated the code like a second job without pay, checking in new builds after dinner, fixing bugs on the couch, and pushing the card engine further than he had ever planned. He experimented with a pseudo shop that offered upgrades between rounds, giving a small taste of the run-based economy that would later define Balatro. By February, Joker cards appeared as small modifiers beside the deck, and early boss blinds began showing up as odd hands that slightly altered the standard rules, just enough to keep players on edge. Around the same time, his day job required him to work outside his home province for a while. The long days away from his usual desk cut into the hours he would spend adjusting cards and code. Progress slowed even as the idea list grew longer. By early March, he hit his first real wall. He looked at the project, glanced at the features he still wanted, and realized that the drive to sit down and build had turned into something closer to dread. In the past, this was when a prototype would quietly die on his hard drive, making room for a new one. This time, he followed his own rule and completely stopped working on Joker Poker altogether, letting the little card game cool off. For a while, that break worked. Joker Poker remained dormant, while other parts of his life took the hours it used to consume, and it seemed like the story had ended there. Then, in May 2022, something clicked back into place. He tackled the issues that had frustrated him before the break. he toyed with ideas such as a separate reroll currency and a golden seal mechanic for playing cards, but quickly discarded them. The rest of 2022 became a long stretch of trial and error. Every hour not spent on the IT job went into Joker Poker, transforming the project from an inspired prototype into a single-player roguelike deck builder centered on escalating blinds and delicate synergies. The big two roots remained in the idea of bending familiar hands into stranger shapes, but the focus shifted to poker, a language more players would understand. The cards on screen started to look like a real deck, even though the rules underneath drifted further from any casino table. During this period, he kept his distance from other deck builders. The main exception was Luck Be a Landlord, a roguelike slot machine he had already played and admired, especially after watching Northern Lion stream it and observing how viewers reacted to its take on risk and reward. Aside from that, he avoided the typical references until the Steam page era, when he finally installed Slay the Spire to learn how it managed controller support and menus. Jokers settled into their role as passive modifiers beside the deck, subtly changing scoring in ways that could snowball into absurdity. Tarot, Planet, and Spectral cards are layered over the standard 52-card deck, allowing players to fuse, level, or transform cards until a familiar hand could surprise them again. Boss blinds evolved into named challenges that twisted the basic rules during specific antes, forcing players to plan around limitations such as blocked suits or weakened hand types. He sent test versions to a few friends, one of whom quietly logged dozens of hours long before a Steam page existed. There's a special kind of stubborn care baked into that loop. By the end of that year, the project had grown far beyond the small online toy it was meant to be. Joker Poker was no longer just a gift for friends or a way to relieve stress between support tickets. It was becoming a game that could justify quitting a stable job, signing with a publisher, and testing whether a deeply unusual card roguelike could stand on its own in the market. By early 2023, after moving provinces and leaving his IT job, LocalThunk stopped treating his project as something to work on only on nights and weekends. Instead, it became his full-time focus during the day, supported by savings and a partner. For the first time, the card game no longer competed for his attention with support tickets. In March 2023, he hired composer Louis Clement through Fiverr to create the soundtrack, feeling nervous because that was the only money he had spent or planned to spend on the game. In late May 2023, he uploaded the first public beta build to Steam and launched Balatro's store page. At that point, he still joked with friends that he might sell 10 copies and mainly use the project as a portfolio piece for future job applications. Wishlist did not heed that modest plan. Over the next stretch, the count went from dozens to hundreds, then quietly into the thousands as even more people found the page. Some visitors came through the store's recommendation algorithms, while others discovered it through short clips shared by early fans, but the result was the same. What started as a project for a few friends was now attracting attention from strangers who were marking it as something to watch. By July 2023, Balatro signed with publisher Playstack. They would handle the release logistics across platforms, allowing him to focus on the game. The deal provided a team to manage platform certification and community channels, and to plan a launch across PC and consoles rather than just one store. It also included a clear understanding that mattered to him. The core design would remain his, and the publisher would help expand it rather than change it into something else. Balatro participated in events like Steam Next Fest, where time-limited demos showcased the game to those already looking for new roguelikes and deck builders. Streamers and YouTubers received early builds and started posting gameplay that explored the wildest Joker combinations they could find, treating each hand like a puzzle and every failed run as a small story worth sharing. Tournament-style events in which players aimed for high scores showed how the game held up when people tested its systems to the limit. Beta feedback led to concrete changes in how the game played and paced itself. The boss's blinds, which had been either too harsh or too forgiving, were adjusted to provide structure without being unfair. Stakes, the difficulty levels determining how many Annies you need to clear, were tuned, so each step up felt like a meaningful choice rather than a random jump. Some jokers that were too powerful in early runs were toned down, while underused cards were nudged into playability, keeping the pool of about 150 cards surprising. As the release date approached, the pressure increased through late 2023 and into early 2024. He later described February 2024 as super crunch mode. The work itself didn't change much. He was still tuning numbers, fixing bugs, and responding to feedback, but the hours stretched until the line between days blurred. Sleep became shallow and fragmented, shaped more by deadlines and message alerts than by any natural rhythm. By October, that stress had taken a toll on his body. Heart sensations and tightness in his chest woke him enough at night that he sometimes chose to sleep half upright on the couch, propped up in a way that felt safer than lying flat. Days that should have been spent calmly polishing tooltips or testing controller support instead began with worrying whether a new symptom signaled something serious. At the same time, wish lists and social media mentions surged. Every mention of Balatro came with an awareness of the work that still needed completion. In January 2024, those pressures collided. A particularly intense bout of chest pain and shortness of breath sent him to the doctor, convinced he might be having a heart attack. Tests ruled that out. Doctors told him it was just an anxiety attack caused by stress, just as the release date drew closer. The release date did not change. The game still needed to be finished, certified, and packaged, while he tried to understand that his body had finally shown a real stop sign. Steam wish lists surged as media coverage spread, from niche roguelike channels to larger outlets that highlighted Balatro as one of the most promising indie games of the year. Preview tournaments featured streams where players pushed jokers into combinations even their creator hadn't thought of, and screenshots of broken scoring loops spread around social media like trophies. On February 20, 2024, Balatro was finally released on PC and consoles for around $15. Within the first 8 hours, the game generated over $1 million in revenue, far exceeding the 10 copies he once joked about selling. In the first 72 hours, around 250,000 copies were sold across platforms. By the 10-day mark, that number had risen past 500,000, and by the end of the first month, sales had crossed 1 million units. About 6 months later, Balatro had sold about 2 million copies. By January 2025, total sales across platforms surpassed 5 million, boosted by a spike in attention after awards season. Player reception was strong. On Steam, user reviews quickly climbed into the overwhelmingly positive range, with tens of thousands of players rating the game, many noting it had consumed their evenings. Review scores for the console versions settled around low 90s, placing Balatro alongside much larger productions. Awards followed the sales trend. In 2024, Balatro won Golden Joystick Awards for Best Indie Game and a Breakthrough Prize, standing on a stage where solo projects rarely appear. At the Game Awards that same year, it won Best Independent Game, Best Debut, and Best Mobile Game, becoming the first solo-developed project ever nominated for Overall Game of the Year. In 2025, it won the Game Developers' Choice Awards for the Game of the Year and collected several trophies at the DICE Awards in categories for independent work, strategy, and mobile games. On March 1, 2024, a Mac OS version was released, making it easier for laptop players to fit runs between other tasks. On September 26, 2024, Balatro arrived on iOS and Android, and the Apple Arcade version was released as Balatro Plus. The mobile launch turned short breaks into chances for runs and generated about $1 million in revenue in the first week. In the first 2 months, it climbed to roughly 4.4 million as word of mouth met the convenience of a pocket-sized card roguelike. Cross-game collaborations began to pop up as well. Starting in late 2024, the free Friends of Jimbo collaboration packs allowed players to reskin face cards with crossover art. Pack 1 features characters inspired by The Witcher 3, Dave the Diver, Vampire Survivors, and Among Us. Pack 2 followed with Cyberpunk 2077, Slay the Spire, Stardew Valley, and The Binding of Isaac. Later packs included other games like Divinity Original Sin 2. Physical goods followed the digital collaborations. Official playing card decks featuring Pixel Joker art appeared in online stores. Calendars, pins, plush toys, and t-shirts followed up, some leaning into the developer's mystery with slogans that treated LocalThunk like a folk character. In late 2025, the merchandise got even stranger. A 2026 wall calendar featured actor Ben Starr as Jimbo, recreating Joker poses in live action. Through it all, the person behind the alias stayed mainly out of the spotlight. At award shows like the Game Awards and the Game Developers' Choice Awards, PlayStack staff accepted trophies on his behalf while he remained backstage or away from the ceremony. Reports from outlets that spoke with him describe a thoughtful, reserved developer who was happy to discuss systems and stress but reluctant to take on a public role. He attended industry events like the Game Developers Conference and gave interviews, yet he kept his alias separate from his personal life and the public. Financially, Balatro's success changed his options overnight. Coverage noted that the game's revenue allowed him to buy a house with his partner and build a life where he could focus on game development instead of IT. At the same time, those articles emphasized that he and his partner were already used to living far below their means, having done so for years through budgeting, and that they intended to keep things simple. The windfall provided them security and choices, not a reason to pursue a flashy lifestyle. In the months following the launch, patches addressed balance issues, crashes, and minor problems, culminating in a significant April 2024 update that eased difficulty in some parts of the run without flattening the challenge. Later patches accompanied the mobile release and the Friends of Jimbo cosmetic updates. Behind the scenes, he began planning a major 1.1 update with new jokers and features, but he also made it clear he saw this as a 2026 project rather than cramming it into the current year. Earlier health scares had taught him a clear lesson, and he didn't want to repeat the strain of Super Crunch. A 3-week side project by an anonymous IT worker in Saskatchewan became one of the biggest solo indie successes in years because it built on roughly a decade of quiet practice, a willingness to step away and return when the work became stale, and a keen eye for how to make simple rules intersect in surprising ways. Balatro's journey reminds us that overnight success is often a decade of invisible work, plus one project that finally catches fire. Thank you for sticking with the story. Your time is appreciated. If you're interested in more documentaries like this, more stories are waiting for you on the channel. Take care of yourself, stretch, drink some water, and rest your eyes.